Long ago, before humanity ever looked up to the stars, there was a race that called themselves the Alphas. They were tall, strong, and feared across the galaxy. Their ships were larger than cities. Their weapons could melt entire planets. Other species bowed to them, for none could stand against their power. The Alphas believed they were chosen to rule forever. In their eyes, every other species was weak, like animals waiting to be hunted. They spread across the stars, building empires on the ashes of those they conquered. They did not understand mercy, only control. For thousands of years, no one dared to resist them. Their name alone brought fear. The Alphas would enter a system, demand tribute, and leave with everything they desired. The weaker races survived only by giving away their freedom. But then whispers began. In the dark corners of the galaxy, traders spoke of a new species. They came from a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star. They called themselves humans. At first, the Alphas laughed. What could such a small young species do? How could they compare to the rulers of the galaxy? Yet something about these humans was different. They were not as strong nor as advanced, but they were bold. They dared to fight even when the enemy was stronger. They dared to dream even when the galaxy laughed at them. The first Alpha scouts sent to watch humanity found something strange. Humans built weapons quickly. They turned machines meant for farming into machines for war. They worked together with a fire in their hearts. The scouts reported this, but their leaders dismissed it. Humans are nothing, the Alpha Council said. They will break like all the others. But one Alpha commander, older and wiser than the rest, felt uneasy. He had studied history. He had seen what happens when arrogance blinds rulers. He warned the council, these humans are danger. As they are not like the others we conquered, they have something we do not understand. If we do not crush them now, one day they may rise against us. The council ignored him. They were Alphas, the eternal rulers. No weak, fragile species could ever threaten them. At least that is what they believed. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was reaching for the stars. They had fought countless wars among themselves. They had known hunger, pain, and struggle. But these struggles had made them stronger. Every battle, every hardship had taught them one lesson. Never surrender. When the first human ships ventured beyond the solar system, they carried this spirit with them. They were explorers, but also survivors. They were ready to face whatever waited out there. The Alphas watched, amused. To them, humans were children playing with fire. The galaxy was dangerous. Surely humans would be crushed by the first true enemy they met. But instead, something else happened. Humans did not bow. When challenged, they stood tall. When attacked, they fought back. When beaten, they rose again. And with every battle, they grew stronger. The Alphas began to notice. Worlds that had once been silent under Alpha rule now whispered of hope. They say the humans fight the Alphas, one race whispered. They say the humans win battles, another said. Hope began to spread like fire in dry grass. The Alpha Council grew uneasy. The laughter faded, replaced by anger. No primitive race can challenge us, they declared. We will show the galaxy what happens when prey dares to strike the hunter. So they prepared their fleets, great armadas of shining warships, millions of soldiers armed with the deadliest weapons. They would crush humanity before this new spirit could spread. But deep inside, that old commander who had warned them felt a cold fear. He had seen something in humans that reminded him of a force long forgotten. He had seen in their eyes a hunger, not for conquest, but for survival. And survival was the greatest weapon of all. The stage was set. The Alphas, rulers of the stars, were ready to teach humanity a lesson. But they did not know the truth. The lesson would not be theirs to give. It would be theirs to learn. For humanity was different. Humanity was stubborn. Humanity would fight. And though they might fall, they would always rise again. The galaxy was about to witness the beginning of a war that would change everything. And in the end, the Alphas would learn that even rulers can fall. The Alpha fleets moved like shadows across the stars. Their ships were black, sharp, and silent. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy entire worlds. When they gathered at the edge of human space, the galaxy held its breath. The Alphas were sure of their victory. To them, this was not a war, it was a punishment, a lesson for daring to defy the rulers of the galaxy. They believed the humans would tremble, surrender, and beg for mercy. But the humans did not tremble. They did not surrender. Instead, they prepared. Earth's leaders gathered in secret councils. Old generals who had fought human wars stood beside young commanders who dreamed of the stars. They knew the Alpha fleets were stronger. They knew humanity had fewer ships, fewer weapons, fewer soldiers, but humans had something else. They had creativity. They had the will to fight even when defeat seemed certain. The first Alpha strike came without warning. A fleet of 20 massive warships entered a human colony system. The Alphas announced their presence with fire. Cities burned, skies turned red, and millions screamed. The Alphas laughed. This is the end of humanity, they declared. But then, something unexpected happened. A small group of human ships appeared from behind the moon of the colony world. They were old ships, patched with metal and paint. They were slow and fragile compared to Alpha cruisers, but they were armed with clever human signs, hidden cannons, guided missiles, and traps waiting in the dark. The humans struck with precision. They did not fight like the other species the Alphas had crushed. They did not line up and wait to be destroyed. They fought like wolves, fast, unpredictable, and merciless. They lured the Alpha ships into narrow asteroid fields. They used the gravity of planets to sling their weapons farther than expected. They sacrificed damaged ships to create explosions that tore holes in Alpha shields. For the first time in thousands of years, the Alphas were surprised. One of their mighty warships was destroyed. A second was crippled. Their fleets had never suffered such humiliation from a species so young. The Alpha commander roared in anger. These humans are nothing but vermin. Crush them all. But every time the Alphas advanced, the humans slipped away. Every time the Alphas thought they had won, another trap awaited. The battle raged for days. The humans lost many ships, and many brave souls gave their lives. But the impossible had happened. The Alphas had been stopped. When the battle ended, only half of the Alpha fleet returned to their territory. The humans had survived. The galaxy could hardly believe it. Species that had lived in fear for centuries whispered in secret, "The Alphas can bleed," they said. "If the humans can fight them, maybe so can we." Back in Alpha territory, the Council was furious. Never in their history had they suffered such a disgrace. They demanded answers. The defeated commander bowed low and said, "These humans, they do not fight like others. They are not afraid of death. They do not surrender. Every loss only makes them stronger." The Council refused to listen. "We are Alphas," they thundered. "No race can defeat us. We will gather our full armada and erase them from the stars." But the old commander, the one who had warned them before, he remained silent. Inside, he felt a growing fear. He remembered the look in the humans' eyes. Not the eyes of prey, not the eyes of slaves, but the eyes of survivors. And he knew deep in his heart that the galaxy was about to change. On Earth, humanity buried its dead, tears were shed, but their spirit did not break. Instead, their anger grew, their resolve turned into steel. They had faced the strongest empire in the galaxy and survived. Now they prepared for the next battle, and humanity whispered a promise to the stars. "We will not kneel, we will not break. If the Alphas want war, we will give them war." The first contact war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Alphas had tasted something they had not known in ages, resistance, and that taste filled them with rage. To lose ships to a young race was an insult they could not forgive, so the Council made its choice. Not one fleet, not one strike, but the full armada. They would bring fire to humanity's worlds until nothing remained but ash. Across the stars, Alpha warships gathered, hundreds of them, each bristling with weapons that could tear a planet apart. They moved like a storm, a black tide sweeping toward Earth's colonies. The galaxy watched in silence. Every race knew what came next. This was how the Alphas crushed hope. This was how they erased those who dared to rise. On Earth, alarms rang across every command center. Satellites screamed warnings of massive fleets crossing into human space. Generals stared at the screens, their faces pale. They knew the truth. This was no border raid. This was extinction. The invasion began with fire. Human colonies at the edges of space lit up like dying stars. Cities crumbled, oceans boiled, and skies turned black. The Alphas unleashed their wrath without mercy. And yet, even in that horror, humanity fought. On one colony world, a group of human soldiers refused to retreat. Armed with nothing more than rifles and old tanks, they stood against Alpha machines 3 times their size. They were crushed in the end. But before they fell, they destroyed 3 enemy walkers. Their sacrifice was broadcast across human channels, and their courage became a symbol. In space, small human fleets struck from the shadows. They knew they could not win in open battle, so they became ghosts. They hid in asteroid belts. They attacked supply ships. They used tricks the Alphas could not predict. Every time an Alpha fleet moved deeper, it found itself bleeding, but the cost was high. Every victory for humanity carried loss, millions dead, countless cities destroyed. For the first time, Earth itself trembled. The Alphas had never come so close. Their fleets were only days away from striking at the birthplace of mankind. Panic spread across the human world. Would Earth fall? Would the dream of reaching the stars end before it began? But even in fear, there was unity. For the first time in history, all human nations stood together. Old enemies set aside their grudges. Factories roared with new life, building ships faster than ever before. Scientists worked day and night, soldiers trained without rest. It was no longer about borders, no longer about nations. It was about survival. In the Alpha Council, arrogance still ruled. They watched their fleets destroy human colonies and declared, "See, they are nothing. They will be erased as all the others were erased." But cracks had begun to show. Reports from commanders spoke of strange tactics, of humans who refused to surrender even when surrounded, of human fleets that vanished only to strike again. The old Alpha general, the one who had warned them, spoke once more. "You do not understand these humans. They do not fight for conquest. They fight because they cannot imagine giving up. Every death only fuels their fire." The council ignored him again, blinded by pride. They ordered the fleets onward, toward Earth, toward the heart of humanities. And yet, in the dark, humanity was planning something bold, something reckless, something only humans would dare. They had captured pieces of Alpha technology from fallen ships, and their scientists had discovered weaknesses. The Alphas were powerful, but their pride made them predictable, and predictability could be broken. As the invasion spread, humanity prepared its counterstrike, a desperate gamble that could either save them or doom them forever. The storm was growing, the galaxy held its breath, and the Alphas, still certain of their victory, did not see the trap waiting for them. The invasion had begun, but the war was only just starting. The Alpha fleets moved closer to Earth. Every day their warships darkened new skies. Every hour more human colonies fell. It seemed unstoppable. The end of humanity was near. But something had changed. Humanity was no longer only defending. They were adapting. Every battle, every defeat taught them new lessons, and humans were quick learners. In hidden bunkers and secret labs, scientists worked with captured Alpha tech. They tore apart enemy machines and studied every piece. They discovered flaws the Alphas had ignored, weak points in their shields, blind spots in their scanners, old habits in their formations. The Alphas believed they were perfect, but perfection makes one blind. Commanders gathered in war rooms, maps of stars glowed across the screens. They planned not just survival, but a strike, a counterattack that no one expected. Not even the Alphas. The plan was dangerous. It would mean sending human fleets deep into Alpha territory, behind their front lines, to strike their supply routes, their fuel depots, their command ships. Many believed it was madness, but madness was sometimes the only path to survival. The first strike began in silence. Small human ships, disguised as wrecks, drifted among asteroid fields. When an Alpha supply convoy passed, the wrecks came alive. Engines roared, weapons blazed, the convoy burned, and for the first time in the war, Alpha fleets found themselves hungry and short on fuel. More strikes followed, hit-and-run attacks in the dark of space, human fleets appearing where they were least expected, destroying communications, stealing data, vanishing before the Alphas could respond. The mighty armada slowed. Its unstoppable march began to stumble across the galaxy. Whispers grew louder. The Alphas bleed. The humans strike them. The humans fight like no one has before. On one battlefield near a dying star, a human fleet faced an Alpha squadron 3 times its size. The Alphas moved with arrogance, certain of victory, but the humans had prepared. They lured the enemy close to the star's unstable magnetic storms. At the right moment, they unleashed an EMP wave. Alpha ships went blind, their shields flickered, and in that moment, humans attacked. By the time the storm cleared, the Alpha Squadron was gone. News spread like wildfire. The Alphas were not invincible. The galaxy trembled with new hope, but hope came with a price. Human losses were heavy. Every victory was paid in blood. Entire fleets were sacrificed to buy time. Every family on Earth knew the pain of loss. And yet, the spirit of survival only grew stronger. Back in the Alpha Council, fury boiled. Their fleets were stumbling, their enemies multiplying. Other races, long enslaved, began to resist in small ways. Inspired by humanity, the Council declared, "We will crush this rebellion. We will erase humanity before the spark becomes a fire." But the old Alpha General spoke again. "You do not understand. Every ship you destroy, every city you burn, only makes them more dangerous. Humans do not fear death. They turn death into strength." His words were ignored once more, but deep in his heart, he knew the truth. The Alphas had already lost. They just did not know it yet. On Earth, leaders stood before their people. "We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. Bull, bull. But we are not broken. This is not the end. This is the turning point." And so humanity prepared for the next phase of war. Not hiding, not running, but striking back with fire. The Alphas had unleashed their wrath, but now humanity was about to unleash theirs. The galaxy watched, the hunters had become the hunted, and the rulers of the stars were about to learn the price of arrogance. The war had changed. No longer were humans only defending, no longer were they only running, they were moving forward. And for the first time in history, the Alphas felt the weight of fear. It began with whispers. Alpha colonies on the edge of their empire reported strange attacks, supply stations vanished into fire, command outposts went silent. At first the Council dismissed it as rebels, but then the truth came. It was not rebels, it was humanity. The humans had crossed into Alpha space. They had brought the war to the hunter's own doorstep. The first liberation shocked the galaxy. On a mining world enslaved for centuries, Alpha guards ruled with cruelty. But one night, the sky lit with fire. Human ships descended through storms of lasers. Their soldiers charged into the mines, and when the dust cleared, the slaves were free. For the first time, a world had been taken back from the Alphas. The galaxy trembled. For centuries, the Alphas had been the predators, but now they were the prey. Human fleets struck fast and vanished faster. They did not stay to fight full battles. They struck where the Alphas were weak. They destroyed their fuel, their weapons, their pride. And with every strike, more species rose. Those who had once knelt in silence began to fight in secret. Whispers turned to shouts. The galaxy began to believe. On one battlefield, the humans faced impossible odds. An Alpha dreadnought larger than a city descended upon them. Its weapons glowed with power enough to split a moon. The human fleet was small, outgunned, but they had a plan. They hid inside the rings of a gas giant, their ships weaving through storms of ice and dust. When the Dr. Idnot entered the rings, the humans detonated hidden charges. The planet's own debris became a weapon. A wave of rock and ice shattered the dreadnought's shields, and human torpedoes finished the kill. The monster fell and the galaxy roared with hope. The Alphas, for the first time, began to panic. Their fleets could not be everywhere. Their enemies were multiplying. Their name no longer inspired fear. It inspired rebellion. Inside the Alpha Council, anger burned. How can this be? They are a young race. They should be slaves, not soldiers. But the old general whispered, "You never understood. Humans are not fighting for power. They are fighting for survival. And survival makes them stronger than us all." On Earth, the people cheered. Their dead were mourned, their losses remembered, but their spirit burned brighter than ever. Children grew up hearing the stories of battles won. Soldiers volunteered in numbers greater than the armies could hold. Humanity had become more than a race. It had become a fire the Alphas could not extinguish. And so the humans pressed forward, world by world, battle by battle, until the unthinkable happened. The Alpha Empire itself was shrinking. The rulers of the stars, the ones who had once called themselves eternal, were now being pushed back by those they had mocked as weak, and the galaxy watched with awe. For the first time in history, the balance of power was changing. But the humans knew this was only the beginning. The final battle had not yet come. The Alphas still had their capital. They still had fleets vast enough to burn 100 worlds. The war was not over. But for the first time, victory did not seem impossible. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy knew one truth. The hunters were now the hunted, and the age of the Alphas was ending. The galaxy was on fire. Everywhere, Alpha fleets were in retreat. Worlds that once trembled in fear now rose in rebellion. The hunters of old were bleeding, and humanity was at the front of the storm. But the war was not yet won. At the center of the Alpha Empire stood their capital, a planet of black stone and silver towers, surrounded by defense fleets so vast they looked like a second sky. For thousands of years, no enemy had come close to it. No enemy had even dared. Until now, human leaders knew the truth. If the capital fell, the empire would shatter. If it stood, the war would drag on for years. So humanity made a choice. They would strike at the heart. They would end the war. The fleet that gathered was the largest in human history. Hundreds of ships, each scarred by battle. Beside them came allies, races once enslaved by the Alphas, now fighting side by side with humanity. It was a sight the galaxy had never seen. The weak had united. The prey had become predators. The Alpha Council prepared as well. Their fleets filled the void. Dreadnoughts and carriers stretched across the stars. On the capital world, soldiers lined the walls. Every weapon pointed outward. The Alphas would fight to the last. Their pride demanded it. The battle began with fire. The void lit with storms of plasma and missiles. Human ships darted between giants, striking fast, retreating faster. Alpha warships crushed them in numbers. But every time a human ship fell, another rose to take its place. The Allied fleets joined, thousands of voices screaming the same word, freedom. In the chaos, a small human strike force slipped through. Their mission was clear: destroy the planetary shield that guarded the Alpha capital. Without it, the world would be exposed. With it, the Empire would survive. The strike force moved through storms of fire. Ships burned around them, but they pressed on. They reached the shield generator, a massive fortress orbiting the capital. There, the fiercest battle of the war began. Human marines boarded the fortress. Blades clashed. Guns roared. Alpha soldiers fought with desperate fury. But the humans did not stop. They fought through hall after hall until they reached the core, and with one final charge they planted the bombs. The explosion shook the stars. The shield collapsed, and for the first time, the Alpha capital was vulnerable. The human fleet descended. The allies followed. The sky above the Alpha homeworld turned red with fire. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled. The towers of the rulers fell. Inside the council chambers, the Alpha leaders raged. This cannot be. We are eternal. We are Alphas. No one can defeat us. But their voices were drowned by the thunder of battle, by the roar of a galaxy that no longer feared them. The old Alpha general stood in silence. He had warned them. He had seen this end long before. And as the walls shook, he whispered, "Arrogance is the death of empires." On the surface, the last Alpha strongholds fell one by one. Human flags rose where Alpha banners once stood. The empire that had ruled the stars for millennia was finished. The hunters were hunted, the rulers were erased, and humanity had delivered the final blow. But the victory was not without cost. Countless human ships were gone. Entire generations had been lost to war. The galaxy was scarred forever. Yet in those scars, something new had been born. Hope. The Alphas had fallen, and the stars belonged not to rulers, but to those who dared to fight. The war was over. The Alpha Empire was gone. Once they had ruled the galaxy with iron claws and burning fire. Now their cities lay in ruins, their fleets scattered as dust. The hunters had become the hunted, and in the end they were no more. But the victory was not easy. The stars were filled with the wreckage of ships. Human vessels floated silent, their crews gone. Allies wept for their dead. Entire worlds carried scars that would never heal the cold. This was heavy, yet humanity had paid it because survival had always been their greatest weapon. The galaxy was silent for a time. Nations old and broken wondered what would come next. Would humanity replace the Alphas? Would they become new rulers, new conquerors? Many feared it, But the humans did not seek crowns, they did not seek thrones, they sought only freedom. And they offered that freedom to others. On the freed worlds, the people whispered the same words. The humans saved us. The humans fought when no one else would. The humans never surrendered. The stories spread faster than light, tales of soldiers who stood against impossible odds, tales of fleets that burned brighter than stars, tales of humanity's courage. And soon, humanity was no longer just a species, it was a symbol. Children of distant worlds painted their walls with human flags. Old slaves took human names as marks of honor. The galaxy no longer feared the alphas. Now, it respected the humans, and even more, it believed in them. Yet humanity did not rest. They knew the truth. One empire had fallen, but danger would always exist. The galaxy was wide, and shadows always waited, so humanity prepared, not to conquer, but to stand ready. For if ever darkness rose again, humanity would be the light. On Earth the survivors gathered. In great halls, leaders spoke, not of power, not of victory, but of memory. They remembered the ones who had fallen, the ones who had given everything, and they swore their sacrifice would never be forgotten. In that silence, one line echoed across every world, a line born from fire and blood, a line that would never be forgotten. Humans may fall, but they never surrender. The galaxy carried those words. Species who had once been silent now shouted them. Warriors painted them on their armor. Leaders spoke them to their people. And the alphas, erased from existence, became nothing more than a warning. Humanity had no crown, no empire of slaves, but they had something greater. They had respect. They had fear. They had honor, the legacy of humanity. Tai was clear, not as rulers of the stars, but as defenders of them, not as conquerors, but as survivors. And so the story ended not with silence but with fire, the fire of a race that could not be broken, a race that had risen from a small blue world, a race that had faced the strongest empire in history and erased it from the stars. The galaxy would never forget the alphas, but it would remember humanity forever.